Hey, this is Ben from FastingWell, and today I'm going to talk about what foods it makes sense to eat when you break your fast, what types of food and why, and then a few specific examples. So this is mainly relevant if you're doing a fast for at least 24 hours or anything kind of in that vicinity or longer. So if you're fasting for a few days, then it really is important to think about what you eat when you break your fast. If you're just fasting for 12 hours or 14 hours, it's not that big of a deal and you don't need to think as much about what to eat when you break your fast. Okay, so when you're breaking your fast and you're thinking about what to eat, there are 3 principles to keep in mind. And the first one is that if you're fasting for a while, like a couple days or more, then your body kind of forgets how to metabolize carbohydrates because guess what? It's not digesting or really using any carbohydrates. So it kind of forgets. In other words, it says we don't really need to use that machinery or those enzymes, and so it kind of gets rid of that stuff. It down-regulates all the stuff that helps you metabolize carbs. So the last thing you want to do when you break a long fast is eat a bunch of carbs like pizza or bread or pasta. So stay away from the carbs the first couple meals after your long fast. So that's principle number 1, low carb. Number 2 is if you're doing a fast for more than about 3 or 4 days, then your stomach's going to shrink a little bit. And your stomach's just going to kind of be resting and not very active, and so it's going to shrink. And then after you finish your fast, when you break your fast, you don't want to eat too much food all at once because then you're going to get a tummy ache. So basically you need to start small and go slowly. Or start low and go slow is a more memorable way to say that. So the first one was low carb. The second one is start low and go slow. And you got to be patient. In other words, eat something small and wait a couple hours. See how you're feeling. So those are the main 2 principles. The third one is the reason you're fasting probably has something to do with improving your health or maybe burning body fat, but that's also a way of improving your health, right? So if you're trying to improve your health, then don't go out there and eat a whole bunch of junk food at the end. For the first reason that I said, which is you don't know how to metabolize sugar or carbohydrates, so you don't want to spike your blood sugar like crazy at the end of your fast. But also, you're trying to get healthier, so don't go eat a whole bunch of processed food at the end of your fast. All right, so now that we've talked about a few principles to keep in mind, now I'm going to mention a few specific foods that it would make sense to use when you're breaking your fast. And there are a whole bunch of other options. You don't have to stick to just these foods, but if you want a specific example, then here you go. So number 1 is going to be olives. So olives are a good option because, well, they don't have that many calories and they're mostly just fat, so they don't have a lot of carbs, don't have much protein either. So they're pretty easy to digest. And so you would take like a small handful of olives and eat those. So there's option number 1. Option number 2 would be a handful of nuts like almonds. So let's say almonds. So again, you'd use a relatively small amount, like 1 serving or half a serving, and just eat those almonds and then wait a couple hours and go from there. Almonds are pretty low in carbs, and the carbs that they do have are digested very slowly. So you're not going to like spike your blood sugar or spike your insulin by eating a few almonds. Option number 3 is half of an avocado. I probably wouldn't eat a whole avocado at that moment because, again, your stomach's kind of shrunk. You don't want to overwhelm your system. So just do half an avocado, wait a couple hours, and go from there. And you can certainly add some salt because usually in this scenario you want to get some extra salt anyway. So you can certainly put some salt on that avocado. All right, option number 4 is sardines. You could eat a can of sardines. A typical sized can of sardines, that's kind of like 1 serving, probably has about 200 calories. So it's pretty high in fat. It's kind of high in protein, and it has 0 carbohydrates, which is exactly what you want, ideally. So sardines are another great option. Eat that can, wait a couple hours, go from there. Option number 5 that I'm going to share today is celery. And the point here is you could pick any non-starchy vegetable. So not a potato or a sweet potato, but some vegetable that doesn't have a lot of starch in it, like celery, and you could have a reasonable amount of that, like a handful of that. And that could be kind of the initial thing to kind of break your fast. Wait some time, see how your stomach's feeling, and go from there. Okay, quick review. So the principles to keep in mind when you're breaking your fast are low carb. You don't want to eat a bunch of carbs when you break your fast because your body doesn't really know how to handle it right then. It kind of forgot how to metabolize those carbs. So no sugar or carbs right at the beginning. Number 2 is start low and go slow. pick something pretty small, like a handful of whatever, and then eat it. Wait a couple hours, see how your tummy's feeling, because it might get a little upset, and you can kind of play it by ear and see what you can handle as the day goes on. And then number 3 is just don't go crazy on the junk food, because the point of this is to get healthier, and then you'd be doing the opposite if you go out and binge on a bunch of crap after you finish your fast. And then I shared a few specific examples as well of things that would make sense to use at the end of a long fast, and that included olives, almonds or other nuts, half of an avocado, a can of sardines, or some non-starchy vegetables such as celery. So I hope that was helpful, and by the way, I'm going to link to a few resources in the video description that could probably be helpful with this. One of them is a list of a bunch of keto food options, and the reason I'll link to that is because basically anything on that list, just about, is a pretty reasonable option to use when you break your fast. In other words, you would take a small-ish amount of any of those items and then use that when you break your fast. I also have a podcast that I'm going to link to because it walks you through step by step how to get started with fasting and how to make it easier and just basically how to be successful. So I think that's one of the best resources that I have for any beginners with fasting. So I'll put a couple links to different podcast platforms in the video description as well. By the way, I'm a physician assistant, which is similar to a doctor, and I work in the emergency room. I've done family practice, I've done urgent care, and I've been spending a lot of time the past few years learning about nutrition and fasting and doing a lot of self-experimentation and helping other people improve their health through fasting and better nutrition. So I hope it helps, and I'll see you next time on Fasting Well.